And so I'd like to talk a little bit about this concept of legitimacy theory. It's been around for a while now. It's pretty big in international relations and new institutionalism, the area is called. It sort of comes out of public policy analysis. And it's this idea that there's this underlying legitimacy thing. There's this underlying thing that some things are legitimate, some things are not. You see it a lot in international relations because at the EU and at the United Nations, some things are legitimate and some things are not. And those things that are and aren't legitimate aren't necessarily those things that are right and wrong. It does come down to power and who has control and politics and things like that. And we don't sort of think about that sort of stuff too much in engineering. We are very much black and white, right and wrong. In the context of transportation, the invention of jaywalking, roads are for cars. Most of the environment that we wander around in on a day-to-day basis is the bit between the curb is for the cars. And if I step onto that spot and I get hit by a car, that's my fault. That space is legitimately for cars. Contrast that to when I'm in a warehouse environment and the OH&S regulations apply. The forklift is going to be in operation. Everybody's got to get out of the warehouse, no pedestrians. Because OH&S laws basically say a 1-ton piece of metal that can crush people to death should not be used around pedestrians. And yet we accept the idea that a 1-ton piece of metal that can crush people to death can be driven at 40, 50, 60 kilometres an hour through an area with small children outside of school. Because that is legitimate. 300 deaths on the road a year is about what we have in Victoria. It's currently legitimate. And we accept that because it has legitimacy and we make decisions based around that. Whereas one death in a factory, one death in a warehouse is not. And so you can see how we end up with these weird things, these very, very different strategies. And now I'm going a little bit off topic, but you can see the new concepts in road safety around Vision Zero. There is no ethically acceptable number of deaths on the road. And you see that in the rail industry a lot. There has been, the number is zero. It has been zero for a very, very long time in rail engineering because they operate in a fail-safe environment. People should never die. Whereas in road engineering, we do not. Anyway, I have digressed a little bit, but that's what I tend to do. So types of legitimacy. There is a whole series of thought around these sorts of things. So we have regulatory legitimacy. The law requires a bus lane. Sociological legitimacy. We all agree, we should definitely have bus lanes. Legitimacy by consent. We actually had a vote and we decided, yes, we're going to have bus lanes in Melbourne. Reasonableness. Yep, the bus is slow and unreliable. Yeah, we should probably get some bus lanes. Legitimacy is conditional normative support. This is a slightly complicated one, but we see this a lot in transport. I agree with the idea of a bus lane. Wouldn't it be great if we could go everywhere really, really fast? Just not on my street because I want to park my car there. So my support for the idea and the normative goal of bus lanes everywhere is great, but is conditional on how it affects me or conditional on some other things. Plus, there's plenty more other types of legitimacy out there in the theory. Here's an example of how this actually has played out in real life very recently in Melbourne. The DDA, since 1992, requires that all tram stops in Melbourne be disabled access by 2022, I think. We fundamentally don't have a chance of making it, in my opinion. There's still about 1,000 of them to go. Recently, the Greens in, I believe it was the city of Moreland, denied a planning permission for a new disabled access tram stop because it did not allow a bike lane next to the tram stop. Because in the political sphere, bike lanes are very important, particularly for Greens councillors. And yet, these people in their wheelchairs cannot get on and off the trams. And so we are failing in the DDA, And you can see here they're engaged in a little bit of political theatre, trying to say, hey, you know, you should be doing a little bit about this. But this is fundamentally the sphere that we operate in. You can imagine if they'd done this protest before the council meeting, they might have had a little bit more traction. But fundamentally, the decision was made at council, and it's established fact. They will not have a disabled access tram stop for the foreseeable future. So legitimacy in engineering, how does this apply to us? Some of you may be structural engineers. I think you probably find that in practice there's a lot of legitimacy in structural engineering. If you say the bridge is going to hold up, the bridge is going to hold up. Everybody agrees. No one questions you. Yeah, sometimes it goes wrong, and the example of the Westgate Bridge that we have a statue just that way shows, you know, the consequences when engineers make mistakes. But fundamentally, I have a professional engineering license in Ontario. If I stamp a drawing and sign my name to it, go and build it. It's legitimate. An engineer has checked it. In transport, however, everyone's an expert. Everyone has their opinion. Residents slam nonsensical bike route through their hood. There's an engineer at the city of wherever this is who has designed that bike lane. They have thought long and hard about that bike lane. And yet the Save Inkerman members, Robin Taft with dog, oppose the bicycle superhighway. This bicycle superhighway has been thought about by an engineer who wants to save cyclist lives, and they oppose it because it might make it a little bit harder to drive in and out of their driveway. Or, you know, it might take away a parking space. And so in transport, everyone's a driver, everyone's a pedestrian, everyone goes everyone, and everyone knows how to make it better. And this comes down to a concept coming out of psychology, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Everybody will use reach-around knowledge. And we see this a lot in bus lanes in particular. Oh, there's an empty bus lane. That's inefficient. Forgetting the fact that there's a bus coming by every 2 minutes with 50 people on it. But drivers use reach-around knowledge. If there's not a vehicle in the space, it must be free. And so this is some of the challenges that we have. Anyway, going back to the sort of research questions that we're trying to look into in the context of this, why is transit priority implementation legitimate in some places like Zurich, but not so much here in Melbourne? And how should we be doing this sort of stuff in Melbourne? Those are the sort of questions we're trying to answer.